We're going to end this chapter on text file processing with an exercise where we create a to-do list. We're going to start by sketching out the main program in kind of outline form, where I'll show you the functions that we're going to write to add the functionality to the program, and then we'll go back and fill in the details by actually creating the functions. So let's get started. You notice I've already added the #include files that we need, fstream and standard library. So we'll move on to the main program. In the main program, we're going to have a variable called choice, which will be what controls the loop that displays the menu. So the loop is controlled by writing while choice is not equal to 0. 0 will be the selection to end the program. So while choice is not equal to 0, then get the menu choice from the menu function and store it in choice. Then based on that selection, we have a switch statement which will switch on choice. If the choice is 1, then we're going to call a function called showList, which will display the list. If the choice is 2, we're going to call a function called addItem, which adds an item to the list, and so on and so forth if we had other items. We'll have a case 0 if they want to end the program, and it'll just call a break. And then finally, if we don't recognize the input, we'll write out don't recognize input. Indel. Okay, that looks like all we need. Close the switch, close the while loop, and we're ready to go. So before we can run this, we need to at least create the menu. So let's come back up to our global area to write the menu function. Before we do that though, I'm going to create a global variable to store the file name where the to-do list is located. And generally speaking, it's not a good idea to use global variables, but if you know that the value never needs to be changed, and you know you're not going to pass it around a lot through functions, then you can just create a global variable for that file name and leave it as is. So that's what we'll do here. Now let's write the menu function. It's an integer returning function because it's going to return the choice the user makes from the menu. So we create a variable for that choice. We'll call it choice again. Then we display the menu. So we have 0, exit the program, indel, cout 1, display the to-do list, cout 2, add item to the, or let's just say to-do list. Put a space, then prompt the user, enter a choice, get the choice from the user, and return that as the return value of the function. So very quickly, before we go any farther, one thing I do need to do is I need to delete anything that could be in the to-do list from previous testing. So we'll do that real quick. Okay. Now let's run the program. Oops, we left out an indel after our 2 other items. So let's hit 0. Program ends. Add these indels in real quick. Let's build and run the program again. Now it looks like I expected it to look. Hit 0 to end. And now we're ready to write the functions. So I'm going to go ahead and uncomment these before I forget, which I could very easily do. And now let's add those 2 functions into our program. We'll start with showList. It's a void function. It starts out by creating a string variable line, which is going to hold the items for the list. Then we create an ifstream object. Call it with file name, or at least the C type string for file name. And it's an input file, so we use that mode, ios::n. Then we test to make sure it's existing. So we write if not in file, then write out file not found, and exit the program. Otherwise, the first thing we want to do is get the first item from the file like so. Because we're working with strings, we have to use the getLine function just like we did when we were getting input from the console. Here we're getting it from a file, but we have the same problem with spaces, so to get a whole line at once, we have to call the getLine function. Once we've done that, then we need a while loop that says while we're not at the end of the file, write out the line that we got in from the file, and then get another line. That's all we need for the while loop. Close the file. Let's put an extra space after the line. Actually, let's put a couple of spaces after the line. Let's put 3 to make sure that there's plenty of space between our list of items and the menu, which is going to be displayed right after this, and then close the function. So that's the show list function. Now let's write the add item function. Again, it's a void function. The first thing we have to do is something we haven't talked about in this course yet. When you're getting input from the console, and you're getting it in 2 or 3 different functions, or even 1 or 2 different functions, then there's possibilities that old input will still exist in that object, in what's called the buffer, which is like the memory where it stores things. To make sure that's not the case, we need to clear that buffer out. So we do that by calling the clear function for cin, and then we sync it to make sure that we're ready to get new input to the console. So we run those 2 functions, then we create an out file object, an output file object. And again, it has to be a C-type string. And here we'll use the append mode, since that will work either for a new file or for a file that already exists. Now we're ready to prompt the user to enter an item for the list. So we create a variable, prompt the user to enter an item, get the item from the console, then we need to test to make sure that the file exists. You should always do that, even though we've done it once. At any point, something could happen. Then, assuming that the file is there, write the item out to the file and close the file. Let's put a new line to make sure we have room. Let's put a space between our function and int main. Make sure everything looks in place, and I think it does. So let's build and run the program and see if it works. There's our menu. Let's add an item to the to-do list. Let's say rake leaves. Back to our menu. Let's display the to-do list. Very good. Let's add another item. Pick up cleaning. Display the items. Rake leaves, pick up cleaning. Let's add one more item. Let's just say wash dishes. 1 to display. And there's our 3 items. Let's hit 0 to end the program. And that ends it. And that takes us back to our code. So there's a program for adding and displaying the items of a list. The one thing we haven't done is add a choice for removing an item from the list. So in the next exercise, we're going to add a delete item to our menu.